Hey everyone, I am your host Shan, and this is my co-host
Stretch.
and this is the Student to Life podcast. Today we have our special guest Jodie, and remember guys, we are talking about all things pertaining to health. So Ms. Jodie here is a wonderful therapist, and she's going to give us a little bit of insight on what she does, and we're going to dive into, everything mental health, whatever health. So Ms. Jodie, give them a little bit of, a little juice about yourself.
Sure. So my name is Jodie, and I am a psychologist. And so I work with all things mental health related. I currently work with college age students, but I have experience working with all ages, all adults. I would say not kids. I have not worked with kids. And I do individual counseling, group counseling, consultation work on a variety of issues pertaining to anxiety, depression, eating concerns, body image, adjustment to life, the range of things. Okay. So happy to be here.
Okay. That sounds like a lot. But it sounds like everything that we need right now, especially in our culture.
Yeah.
So one of my main questions is why did you decide this field? This field is very difficult.
Yes.
So
it is,
why did you decide to jump into this field?
Yeah. So funny enough, I thought I was going to be a doctor. Typical Jamaican. You're going to be a doctor growing up. And so I started around that track. Really, I always had a passion for helping people. So that really was like something I loved. And then as I was in undergrad and taking classes, I realized with the medical school route, it just didn't seem like it fit perfectly. But I always loved psychology. Like in high school, I took AP psychology. I was like, the brain is so cool. Like I love learning about people. And so that's how like my journey to psychology really started. And then it might not be obvious, but if you don't know, you can't really get a job with a bachelor's in psychology. Like there's not much you can really do.
Yeah.
So you need to get your master's.
Okay.
So I got my master's in counseling. And from there, what made me really go further to get my doctorate in psychology was really noticing the huge gap in representation of Black psychologists, particularly like Black female psychologists. And so like started from my passion for wanting to help people to just like really being fascinated with psychology, how the mind works, and then further wanting to be that kind of representation for individuals who want to have like someone that looks like them to talk to them. And it was like, okay, I need to do this. I want to be like a psychologist and get my degree to create further access.
Nice. Listen, when we met, I literally, when my clients are in my chair, I feel like a therapist. And without you having to tell me that you was a therapist, I literally started pouring my whole life to you.
That just happens. It's something about like just my vibe that I guess people they can just tell that I'm just easy to talk to or listen to. But yeah, I mean, also that's a lot of what therapy is like really just listening to people and like being that support that they need.
Oh my God.
So this is the question I want to ask every therapist.
Okay.
Even when I find one, I ask them this question, like, how do you like separate that, like being in a therapy session, hearing all these problems that people have, and still be able to not take that home with you and not let it burden you as a person? Like, you're going to have some form of empathy as a therapist.
Course,
So how do you take that and like you compartmentalize everything?
I would say it's hard. Like, I'm not going to say it's not. I think something that helps is something that they just teach us in our graduate training is to learn how to compartmentalize. And something that, like, this is something that I teach to my clients, and it applies to, like, anyone who's in a helping profession, is you need to pour into your cup before you can pour into other people. So 100%. I want to be helping myself by continuously, like, trying to, like constantly thinking about my work at home. And so it's kind of, I'll be doing myself a disservice. And so I try to look at it from that perspective of, I need rest. I need to like give myself a break so that I can recenter and then come back to work to like fully pour into other people again. So
does the therapist have a therapist?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Yeah. And it's encouraged in our training that
fine.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, we're humans. We're gonna need support too. We go through stuff.
Right.
So
how many years have you been doing this now?
So let's see, started in, I graduated my master's in 2018. So probably about like 4 years now.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you feel like later on in life that you'll be like, I don't really need a therapist anymore? You think that's something that you always would need as long as you're in this field?
Yeah. I think and the reason why I say yes is because I think that everyone can benefit from a therapist, or like being in therapy. And so I think that just depending on the different life stage that you might be in, or just transitions, or sometimes it might just be maybe more of like a supportive role or like coaching role. So I can always see myself benefiting from therapy, no matter how seasoned I might be.
I mean, I'm kind of glad you touched on that, because that's going to be connected to my next question, which is, I'm Jamaican, right? Growing up, if you need a therapist, you're considered a crazy person.
Or you're just supposed to pray about it.
Right. Or just go to church and find God, and then you'll be just fine.
Yeah.
Now it's becoming more popular, or more popular for people to find therapy. It's not back home yet,
right?
Because they still see it as a taboo thing to go to therapy or even talk about your problems, because we wasn't taught as Caribbean people to talk about whatever's going on with us. Because when I talk to a majority of the people, we've been abused. Even us getting beatings as a child from our parents, that's a form of something we have to talk about also.
Right.
So what do you think about back then versus now when it comes to therapy? Do you see a change in that now?
Yes, absolutely. I think the change starts kind of like what you were talking about, with just we're talking about it more openly. And before so I'm Jamaican also. Grew up in a very Caribbean household, also very religious household.
Right.
So I had no idea what therapy was or what a psychologist was literally until college, like undergrad. And so like that just speaks to how little we are even aware of mental health or like our emotional well-being. And so the fact that I was probably 19, 20 until I actually knew what this field is kind of speaks to what you're talking about. And so I think now I'm seeing other Jamaican students, like other Caribbean students who are like in college, same age I was, who are coming to therapy, who are like saying, yes, I want to focus on my mental health. I'm aware that like, this is important. And so I absolutely do see a change and a shift from just realizing the importance of talking about this openly.
Nice. I think it's going to be a great shift pivot for our culture, because even our parents, we tell them something about we're in therapy or whatever, they're like,
what?
Therapy.
You know what's funny is I think by being in my field, and so it's funny because even when I graduated with my master's, I think my parents still didn't really know what a therapist does, like what I really do.
Sounds like a Jamaican.
Yeah, and so it's like still kind of having to explain to them like, this is kind of the work that I do. This is kind of like what it looks like. But me, just I think by proxy of being in this field, has encouraged my own parents to be like, oh, maybe I can talk to somebody like a licensed professional. They might still go to like the more church counseling, but I'm like, you're getting there. You're opening up. You're talking. And so
I think you said the key word just now.
Yeah,
just opening up your mind.
Exactly.
Let me try this and see what it can do.
And I hear one thing a lot of people say is, they go to therapy but they don't see a change. And what I tell a lot of people is, I think you go to therapy, but you're not really open.
Yes.
You tell the therapist what the therapist wants to hear, or you think they want to hear, but you're not really openly communicating and saying what's really the issue.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So do you have people like that come in and just they tell you minimal amount of information, you got to try to figure it out?
I do. I think, and I try to be like empathetic with those individuals, because it's hard opening up, especially if you've never done it before. It's something brand new that you're doing, and so it's like I think I read in like your bio is like unlearning or relearning, and so it's like that's literally what they're trying to do, from not opening up or talking about it at all to having to be open. And so like I see that, and I also view it from a lens of okay, first of all, to them, I'm a stranger. So like, why would you want to reveal your deepest, darkest secrets to a stranger? So that in of itself is hard. And then two, this is like a brand new behavior that they're doing. So it is going to take some like kind of getting comfortable, like getting out of their comfort zone, challenging themselves. And at the end of the day, sometimes people, they get there slowly. It might be small steps, but.
And one other thing that I hear a lot of my friends would say is, how do I know I could trust this person that I don't know? Because I saw a video the other day with this girl. I heard she got fired, or she got her license taken away. She was online saying that a lot of guys come to her, and she actually interjected herself into the situation. Like a guy would come to her talking about a female, and instead of like openly being open to it, she interjects herself in there and talk about. She was on Twitter talking about it,
like her issues as well, or just
it's like basically saying, why do black men do this, and they always come to me talking about this, so black men need to do this, and it's just like this is information that is supposed to be
should be confidential. Like you don't want your business out in social
So what do you think about stuff like that?
I would say that's a big no-no. And I think it's hard, especially in this age of social media, because on the one hand, I do see like a lot of, therapists, like different professions. It's like we're trying to use Instagram, TikTok to be able to reach people. And I think sometimes we forget that what people tell us is supposed to be confidential, and they tell us in like secret. And so, I think that there is supposed to be that fine line. I do think there is a way where we can still talk about the issues that we're seeing without feeling like we're exposing what people tell us. And so I do think that that's definitely something that would be like an ethical no-no. Like that's not something that you would want in a therapist. And I strongly encourage people, when you're trying to find a therapist, it's okay to like kind of like interview your therapist,
right?
Because sometimes you want to make sure you get the right fit.
That is a gem.
Yes. That's definitely one.
Yes. No one would ever think that.
Right. No one would ever think about
And what normally happens is they'll go, especially if it's their first time. They'll go on and they'll say, "This person's not for me, so therapy's just not for me."
Yes. Yeah. I hear that a lot, and the reality is, like, your therapist is like. No, there's so many different styles of therapy, modalities of therapy, like approaches and the way people work. And so it's a matter of finding the right fit for you. And you're not going to be able to know that until you ask your therapist the right questions. And that can be hard to kind of figure out what it is that you want or, what might be helpful. Something that I try to encourage my clients to do is, so especially if they're Black or a person of color, and that's important to them, one, trying to see on their website or on their page, like, do they say that they work with individuals of color? That's the main thing you can look for. If you don't see it on their website, you can ask them, like, hey, like, how often do you see clients of color? How often do you work with people of color? What's your comfort with that? And maybe trying to think of maybe whatever other questions or values that seem important to you, but it is okay to ask your therapist those questions.
So my first introduction to anything therapy was on The Breakfast Club with Charlamagne.
Okay.
Right? And he said to shop around.
Yes.
But he also said that it has nothing to do with really the race sometimes, because you can find a white therapist that does a great job.
I agree.
Better than a Black therapist.
Right. Yeah.
So I personally, I never tried it, but I'm really looking for, I'm actively looking for one.
Okay.
But to me, honestly, I really would love a Black therapist who could relate to a lot of things that we've been through as Black people. But also, if I could find somebody white who could genuinely just listen and give me good feedback, that would be...
Or even another race.
Any
race.
Any race, for instance. So the next question from me is, I hear a lot of people say that therapists would give them medication.
Okay.
Right? And a lot of people really disagree with that, because a lot of people go to therapy, and once the therapist mention
medication, they're
like, nope, we're not doing this, because
I didn't even know that was normal.
And so I have a friend that went through it, and when he took the medication, he didn't feel like himself. He felt like a zombie in so many ways, like he was just floating through the day when he took it. So what's your thoughts on the medication?
So just briefly, therapists or psychologists cannot prescribe medication.
Right.
Only a psychiatrist can. So therapists or psychologists can suggest or recommend that they see a psychiatrist or a doctor to get medication. But I cannot prescribe medication. That's like, you have to be a psychiatrist, go to medical school for that. I'm not against medication. I don't try to push it against people like down their throat. But the way I view it is, sometimes certain disorders really is a chemical imbalance in your brain. And so sometimes it really is like therapy itself is not enough. But what I encourage people is medication and therapy has been shown, research has shown that can be like the most effective treatment model. And so like I've had clients several times who like they're like had bad experiences with medication, or just kind of like what your friend experienced. And that's the other thing with medication, where unfortunately sometimes it really is trial and error. Trying to find like the right dosage, the right brand that fits, and how I try to shift the perspective or view on medication is treating it like something that you like actually need. So, for instance, well, I don't know if those are prescription glasses, but I wear glasses, so I need contacts.
Really blind,
right? So imagine if you knew that you're blind, you knew that you could not see, but you refused to get glasses. You refused to get that help that you knew would help you on your day-to-day. So viewing medication from that lens of like, okay, if this is truly is a chemical imbalance in your brain, and we're knowing that this is significantly impairing your day-to-day, viewing it as, hey, this is something that can help to try to improve your functioning, improve your day-to-day, and it's not saying that this is a negative thing, but more so viewing it as something that's helpful for you.
What I want you to touch on before you get out of that part is those actual, because I've done some research too, and the actual hormones and how it causes, what causes those hormonal imbalances in the brain. I want to like touch on that a little bit. Just I try to explain it a little bit, what causes that, because I heard what I've researched is stress has a lot to do with that. Trauma has a lot to do with that imbalance in the brain. So can you touch on that a little bit?
So I don't know that much because, again, medication is not my specialty or wheelhouse. But when I refer to the chemical imbalance, so like we do have different hormones and neurotransmitters specifically in your brain, and they work to provide different functions. So I'm sure you guys may have heard of serotonin, like dopamine, like those are different neurotransmitters. And so sometimes when someone doesn't have enough of it, that's what can impact that imbalance, and why some people like they have really just sad, low mood, or like depressed.
Because what from my research, like I said, when you're excited, that's the dopamine that's being released. Whenever you show that emotion, that releases that dopamine in your brain. When you're stressed out all the time, that level gets lower and lower and lower, and then you become a deficient of that dopamine, and now the serotonin and everything else is all off balance, and now your brain is not working in the way it's supposed to.
No, absolutely. And so like one of the ways in which I approach therapy is really I try to incorporate a holistic approach in the sense of and this is backed up through research, in that there is a connection between our physical health and mental health.
I say this all the time too.
And so thinking about like our sleep is something that's very important. Not having enough sleep is going to significantly impact your functioning. It can also impact your mood. The kind of food that you put in your body, that can also impact you as well.
We're going to touch on that. We're going to touch on that. We're going to touch on that. We're not
that all day.
If we touch on that, we're going to touch on that. Sam, what question do you have?
Yes. I mean, I just wanted to know, like, what do you find is like the most difficult parts of just being a therapist? Like, what do you find where it's like, okay, this is taking time, or this is a process where I know I have to get over, or whatever it may be?
Yeah. I think I would say sometimes the difficult part is depending on the different systems that you work in. And so by systems, I mean, could be like the work environment and like their policies in terms of brief therapy or long-term. And so the center which I work at does operate more in like a brief short-term model. That's going to be very different from like working with a private therapist where there is no session limit. But sometimes there is. Many therapists work with insurance companies, and insurance companies don't always have like the best, like the kind of the client's perspective, like, thinking of them first. And so sometimes that can just get tricky when we're thinking about treatment, because there's nothing in the book in our like training that says your depression will be solved in 6 sessions. I can't say that. I can't like prove that.
But the insurance is about business.
Yes. And so sometimes for certain people it can get tricky where maybe their insurance will only pay for like 6 sessions or something like that. Or like if you work in an environment where it's very limited, and so as a therapist, sometimes I feel pressure to be like, I'm trying to help my client, I'm trying to help them to get better, and I feel like there's time crunch. And so sometimes how I try to recenter myself and also help my clients is by informing them, maybe this work that we're doing right now is just like one step on your journey. And so I might not be able to solve your entire problem right now, but we're going to work on tackling a particular part that's going to help maybe bring you greater insight. Maybe you're going to learn something new about yourself, teach you like a better like way to cope, or kind of like, just like increasing something to help you get just enough of what you need. But I think sometimes that is a challenging part of the job is sometimes working with those restrictions.
Yeah.
And again, my passion, my goal is I want to be able to help everybody, help my clients.
Yes.
And so feeling if that's going against my goal
So
can be hard.
Have you ever gotten emotional? Because I doing hair, there's been a few times
You're
where
crying.
I have gotten so emotional with my clients when they go to hairstylist. So it's like, it's okay.
Yeah.
They take me there.
Like you said, you're a therapist too. So.
Right, exactly.
No, but I was telling Shan that like hairdressers, like especially in the Black community, hairdressers, barbers, you guys do tend to be like mini therapists for your clients.
Why do you think though? Do you think it's because they work on here,
the brain,
like, and you're so comfortable while you're doing that? Because I feel like, for instance, if I'm massaging a person's head, they're so comfortable that it will tell you anything. Do you think that's what it is? I don't know.
I think it's just that level of trust and vulnerability. Now, it might not happen with all clients, you know, for sure, but I do think it's you're there for hours most times, right? And so you're there, you have time there, and then like you kind of are in a vulnerable state, you know, when your hair is not done or you're getting your hair done. Sometimes it's just like therapy is a lot about listening. And feeling like you're being heard, at least from the client. And so, like, if your stylist is just like, yeah, girl, like, tell me what's new, like, what's going on. And then if you see them multiple times, and then you get to know them a little bit more, and like, you know, maybe they're partners, or like they have kids or whatever. You start to follow up, and then you start to build that relationship, that rapport. And so I think that's how it starts.
Let's touch on something a little bit deeper. For me, it's so with generations, right? I feel like if you said, you're Jamaican, so you know a lot of us, especially females, go through a lot of trauma in their younger childhood days, and a lot of people don't deal with that at all. We have no tools to deal with that. So when you grow up, a lot of people would think it goes away or it's pushed to the side. But what I tell people all the time from my own research is, it's always there unless you deal with it. No matter if you feel it, it's like stubbing your toe. You know what I'm saying? Your mind maybe not thinking about it, but that toe is still, the nail is still gone. You get what I'm saying? The nail is still gone, but even though your mind is still not there, but that nail is still gone. So the subconscious mind still contains all of these traumas.
You were doing real research. I'm like, okay, come on.
That subconscious mind. And I also tell people that even the music that we listen to, like the repetitiveness of that music, it sits in our subconscious, and it also comes out in action in different ways, because you could be listening to it, like we call it gunman song, all day long, and you never know that causes a reaction if I should say something to you that you don't like. You get what I'm saying? Changes your language, it changes your mood, and everything. So can you touch on that subconscious that's there that people don't understand, because a lot of times, even with dealing with, for instance, like a breakup, you know, you try to drown it out with alcohol or smoking, but that is still there. You try to push it to the side. If you haven't dealt with that, it's still sitting there. So what advice do you have for people when it comes to that?
It's to not ignore it, not avoid it. And so recognizing, I like you were touching on something of how certain experiences that we go through lives in our subconscious. And so I don't know if you heard the term like generational trauma.
Yes. And
how that shows up in a lot of our like Caribbean communities, Black communities especially, and how that persists is kind of like what you're talking about, that subconscious mind. And so the things that, you know, you were talking earlier about how like our parents used to beat us, like be spanking us. They don't even know why they're doing it. They just do it because their parents do it. And then it takes really being intentional of, wait, why am I doing this? Like what purpose is it serving me? And so again, the same thing with not being aware of what am I incorporating or like putting into my mind. That's the reason why for a lot of people they try to do like affirmative statements or like kind of doing those validated statements, because what we say matters. Like our words hold a lot of meaning. And so there's like really being aware of the fact that we can't just pretend that things
it didn't happen.
That it didn't happen. It's okay to acknowledge that pain. It's okay to acknowledge those difficult emotions, those discomfort emotions that we feel. The reason why we avoid it is because, of course, it's not fun. It feels uncomfortable. And as you said, it sticks with us. And so unless we acknowledge it and address it, we're going to see the problem persist
And I think it comes out in behavior. It comes out in behavior so much. Like for instance, a female that's probably been abused young will have different partners just to feel like drown it out in a certain way. Like a person who's probably been raped would be with different partners just to, you know,
or not want to be with
or not want to be with anyone at all. You know what I'm saying? It like encourages that behavior if you don't deal with it. So that's why I always tell people, try to talk about it. That's your first step.
Even if it's not with a therapist, like sometimes it's because I've had many clients who have gone through a lot of trauma and they've never talked about it. And sometimes it's more like, sometimes it can manifest in behaviors, but also sometimes we recognize how it shows up in their relationships with other people, like it being hard to trust, it being hard to even just be vulnerable or open up to other people. And then when we start talking and we dig deeper and deeper, there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of like guilt, it impacts how they view themselves. And so imagine if you've been sitting with this thing that happened to you for years and you've never opened up, or you've never shared it with someone. That's so heavy.
And I always tell people, like habits take 3 months to break a habit. If you have this habit, for instance, I walk a certain way for 5 years, this becomes my norm. Because I've seen people like break a leg, but instead of trying to walk back normal, they walk with that limp for the rest of their lives because that becomes their norm. That's the same thing with your mental health. You don't deal with it. Now you're this angry person for 5 days, and that keeps going 6 days, 7 days, 8 days, and this becomes your personality. That's not who you're supposed to be. That's not how you're put on this earth to be. But because this situation changed you, this becomes your norm now.
That's true.
Because you may not be an angry person to begin with. You might be the kindest person I ever met at 5 or 6 years old, but now something happened, and now
you're just dark.
You're just dark. You get what I'm saying? So I always encourage people.
I could definitely relate to that. And myself going through trauma in my early 20s, and I'll share it because it's something that people need to hear. But I had a stillborn at 22 years old. I had my daughter at 24. 22 years old, I had going on 8 months stillborn. And I was, I don't want to say forced, but doctors were like, you need to go to therapy, this and that, this and that. I didn't go to therapy, but here's why. My clients were my therapists. What happened at that time was I was obviously showing. So I went back to work 2 weeks later, and they're like, well, where's the baby? You know? And it was so emotional. I remember going to the back of the salon like, I cannot do this. I don't know why I'm here. I just boo-hoo crying. And something in me said, you need this. And I kid you not, and this is the only reason I didn't go to therapy. For anybody else that's not a hairstylist and don't have what I was blessed to have. I had so much clients that I didn't even know, even because I was in a salon at the time. So clients of other stylists would come up to me and they say, hey, I've been through this and that. If you want to talk about it, whatever. And that was literally what got me through. It was like my own personal therapy, and I was able to just let go. And then to what Stretch was saying, I could have stayed there. Right? And I tell you not, it's like God had to have me have that experience because I branched and blossomed into someone totally different. And another voice in my head was just like, you cannot stay here. You have to understand why this happened, and you have to move forward. And I was blessed with another baby, with a baby girl. So I always tell people, going through something like that, I literally went through carrying life and carrying death. So I look at life like it's just this beautiful garden of roses. And there will be tumbleweed at times, but that's okay. So consuming yourself with it is like the worst thing you could ever do. And I always tell people, you have to get out of that space and know that there is something else better, because once you tell yourself that and you allow it to come to you, it's like, it's amazing. So,
it's okay to be in that grief and experience those feelings, and also recognizing I don't have to stay here.
Exactly.
And that's going to be, now we're going to touch on.
Real briefly though, can I just say what you were talking about with being a stylist and what you the support that you got from your clients? We call that group counseling or group therapy.
That's like literally what it is.
And so like at my job I also provide group therapy, and one of the reasons why group therapy works is because of that support, like that feeling of I'm not alone. I'm not the only one who's been through this. And so like, even though I've experienced a lot of people who are like, I don't want to open up to people about my problems. I just want an individual therapy. And that can be helpful. And I think there's such power in being able to learn and hear from other people and being able to, and like hear, even if it's like, okay, this person also went through something really terrible, I can get through this too, or like hearing what they did and what worked for them. And so what you're sharing is exactly what we do in group counseling, in group therapy.
And that's why testimonials help a lot of people.
Yes.
So the next thing is, for me, just a couple hours ago, not even a couple hours, maybe like 2 hours ago, I've heard a friend of mine passed away. So do you do like grief counseling, and how do you go about that? Like, for instance, a lot of people would say we are not experienced in how to deal with grief. Especially if somebody else is going through grief, we don't know how to comfort them. I honestly don't know how to. So first question is, do you deal with people with grief? And the next question after that would be, what advice do you have for people that's dealing with somebody with grief?
Well, first, I'm really sorry to hear about your loss. And yes, I do deal with grief in all different forms. And so yes, the grief of like the loss of a person, but also sometimes I talk about grief in like the loss of, maybe it could be an opportunity, or like the loss of like something that they were looking forward to. All those things can also be viewed as grief. And we can also acknowledge it sounds like you're like really grieving maybe this relationship, like grieving like this experience. I think one of the reasons that we don't talk about grief a lot, or why people, like you mentioned, people don't know how to work with grief, is death can be really scary. As a society, we don't necessarily openly talk about death a lot. And so I think that it can fall under one of those taboo topics as to why it feels like it's hard to deal with. What I would say to someone in terms of like how to maybe help someone who is grieving is really just being there for the person. And it might not necessarily always have to look like asking them about, do they want to talk specifically about the person or about like how they're feeling, but understanding that grief can present in several different ways. And so sometimes it could just be normalizing for that person. However you're feeling is valid. However you're feeling is okay, without any judgment, and trying to find ways to support that person. Whether if you know that, hey, maybe this person, like they're a person of routine, or they like to do certain things, trying to see how can I help to encourage that person with those things. Also providing space if you're noticing, okay, maybe this person really does want to, needs to talk about certain things, or wanting a listening ear, being there for that person. But the biggest thing that I noticed with grief is sometimes there is like this feeling of like, it's supposed to look a certain way, and there's no perfect way of what grief looks like.
And everybody deals with it differently.
Yes.
And I always tell people, ever since I knew this since high school, I always tell people, if you want to cry, cry. If you want to fall and roll around on the floor, do that. If that's how you want to let it out. But caging it in is not
the worst thing.
Never the answer. So,
the worst thing.
Because a lot of people, the automatic response is, I'm sorry for your loss, or my condolences. A lot of people don't want to hear that. Because I've heard people say to me, like, I'm tired of hearing that. I don't want to hear that no more. Like, what other things can people say to people in that moment?
Even just, I was going to say, like, just acknowledging, you know what, I probably don't know the exact feeling of what you're going through. But I want to be here for you. I want to provide whatever support I can. Just letting them know, hey, I'm here.
I was gonna say, because it touches back to her saying that some people just don't know how to approach. When people are like, I'm sorry for your loss, and it's like, some people get frustrated. Like, you would get frustrated, and me, I'm more so like, okay, well, I take it in. So I think it also depends on you as a person and how you're processing. And to just analyze how you're processing and understand your process can be affecting the people around you as well. Because I went through that, and when I was shut down and just be like angry, I'm like, damn, it's really affecting my relationship with other people. And, I had to find other outlets to kind of just be open to the love that I was getting from whatever I would have been going through.
So are you one of those people who you don't like, I'm sorry for your loss?
Well, me, I take in all of it, like she said. Like, good energy, I love good energy.
Yeah. I'm a hugger. I'm like, I think I like twice already.
Yeah,
I'm
like, you know what I'm saying? Like, for me, I don't have terms when it. Once you're giving me good energy, that's what I want. Don't come to me and talk about how did he die and you want to go into all of the details. Like, that's something different.
Keep talking about it.
Right. I don't want to keep repeating that portion of it. But the good energy part, I'll take all of it. The hugs, the well wishes, the everything. Like, because I'm not like, for me, I'm not big on grief. I kind of come to the acceptance that people are going to live, people are going to die.
Yeah.
But it hurts. But it doesn't hurt as much because I come to the point where it's like, we're going to lose some people.
It's a natural part of life.
Exactly. But it does hurt. But sometimes I just process it a little bit less than other people because I come to that realization. But in that moment, it does hurt.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So that's how I process that.
Something I'm thinking about, like clients I've worked with in the past with grief, and is I try to encourage them to like try to find different ways to like your own personal way of like still like honoring that person or like doing what you feel like would like fully connect you with them.
Right.
And so like for instance, if you know that like the person that you were close with or just you know that you knew maybe like really like the beach, like maybe like making it a beach day and like kind of like a celebration or just taking a walk and like thinking about them.
For my friend that I lost a couple of years ago, I wear him on my chain. Wherever you see me with this chain with his face on it.
Yeah.
And whenever I play music, it reminds me of him because he used to play music with me too. So one thing that he also reminds me of every time I look at it is just how short life is. And how much I would need to live my life, because a lot of times I could get in a lot of altercations and I just look at the chain and I'm like, yeah, I don't
it's not even worth it.
Right.
So, you know, I this is my symbol of how short life is. Because you know, my friend that passed away today, I talked to him today. Like an hour before I got the news or an hour and a half before I got the news. I talked to him, he was fine.
Right.
To me, he was fine. Somebody else was telling me he wasn't at the moment, but on the phone he was. So it's like you realize that here now and gone the next moment.
So many people are suffering in silence too.
Exactly, but that's what I really want this podcast to do for a lot of people, is to help so many people get out of that type of habit of thinking that, you know, there's no solution to these problems that they're having. There's other people going through the same thing. You know, so.
I mean, before we close, you know, we want to touch on like the biggest thing that is like the biggest two words that people use, especially now in our era, is anxiety and depression. And with all that we spoke about, especially the trauma parts and whatever, I know that all those things play a part in anxiety and depression.
Sure.
And childhood trauma, whatever you must have been through in the past. So, what would you say is, like, how do you go about that now, you know, with dealing with clients, and what would you say some good tools and tips like to be able to overcome it, or to find ways to just find another avenue so that it doesn't consume you? Because before you go, I wanted to literally today, someone was talking about depression and how it's literally the same thing as suppression, and how it's you're suppressing something that you're not allowing yourself to release. You know, and it consumes you. So can you just give us a little bit of enlightenment on that, and just how it is now, and especially with social media and stuff like that, and you speaking, you know, to the students and stuff?
So I mean, depression and anxiety are like the two biggest most general mental health issues that a lot of people face. And I think the reason why we see it so much is because it can be like a manifestation of like different things that a person might be going through. And so kind of like what you're talking about with the suppression, for some people it manifests as, maybe their issues might manifest as depression because they are like maybe not talking about certain things, or not dealing with like certain emotions that are coming up, or like something that's bothering them. And so the kind of avoiding the emotions, or like the dealing with certain things, sometimes can show up as depression. And with anxiety again is a lot of worrying, a lot of like kind of feeling helpless, or like that I can't control worried about the future. And so one thing with depression, I would say one of the most common ways that I try to approach it, it's really hard to generalize because it can really look like different depending on the person. But ultimately, sometimes depending on how severe it is, sometimes we start with just like the behavior stuff. And so like sometimes for people, it's like even starting with the routine, like doing stuff to making sure that, okay, instead of just laying in bed all day or like kind of just staying in the house, can we get you out the house just once?
Right. Yeah.
Like, can we find something for you to
That's what I was going to touch on. So, like I told you, I do some research. So, what I realize is a pattern with a lot of people.
Yeah.
With the depression, it shows symptoms before it actually hits the full force. With you wanting to isolate yourself.
Yes.
That's one of them I see a lot. Especially in a dark room. A lot of people want to be in the dark and isolate themselves from everybody.
That is so
you know? That's
dark.
Right. Everybody, the isolation process is the first, like I feel like that's the first stage of it. And you pushing everybody away is the next stage.
Yeah.
Not wanting to talk to anybody, not wanting to see anybody, not wanting to deal with anybody. Anything that's positive, you reject it.
Yes.
Because you're in that zone and they want to keep you there.
Yeah.
So everything that's contributing to that, that's what you're pouring yourself into. That's what I noticed with a lot of people that goes through depression. As far as anxiety now, for me, I don't say I had anxiety like badly. It was more like I was so shy that it comes off.
Like social anxiety, you mean?
That and other stuff. Like I had anxiety being in front of people.
Oh, okay.
He's an international DJ, by the way.
In high school, I'm gonna tell you the story. So in high school, I played basketball.
Okay.
Right, and the first time this happened to me was in high school. So when playing basketball, like on the court, I would literally black out. Like I would go on the court. Something happened, and then I'll come off and they'll tell me what I did, and I'm like, okay.
Oh, like you literally blacked out.
Like I don't remember what's happening.
Okay.
And I remember I went, so we have devotion in the morning. We won a central competition, so we came first. We got a gold medal, everything, and they called us up to introduce ourselves. The one thing I remember is walking out on that stage. I don't remember anything I said. They told me I said somebody else's name.
Oh my gosh!
Like all I heard was people laughing. When I walked up, everybody was laughing. I was on there.
They're like, what? What was funny? Right?
I was shaking and sweating. Like I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
That was my first time that happened to me.
Yeah.
And then I realized over time, playing basketball in front of a crowd, like I would literally go on the court. Like I would be in practice balling. Like I used to play semi-pro basketball. And I would be in practice balling and doing everything.
Wow.
And then when it comes to the game, it's like my hands sweaty. Like I go on the court and it's like I'm just running up and down. Like I'm just literally just anxious.
Wow.
And once they take me off, it's like a relief. You know. So now I'm in like she says, like all my classmates look at me like, you're playing music in front of people.
Right.
How?
What? You're putting yourself in front of crowds?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So now a lot of them are surprised at that, but now it's just like realizing what it is and learning how to talk myself out of it.
Yeah.
So that is why I'm at the point I'm at now. I'm playing even basketball better than I ever played because I'm able to talk myself out of that whole thing.
Yeah.
So what advice do you have for people that's going through like anxiety and depression, like how to deal with stuff like that?
Yeah. So especially with the anxiety, you know, for some people, and that, you know, it sounds like for you, it definitely was like kind of the crowds, like worried about judgment from other people, or like
the unknown.
Right, the unknown, not being able to control the unknown. And so one of the things that I find helpful generally for depression and anxiety is working on mindfulness. And so mindfulness essentially is being able to focus on being present in the here and now. And so with anxiety, you're worried about the future. You're worried about like things that haven't even happened yet, things that you can't control.
Other people's emotions.
Yeah, like what about the things that you can control? What about the things that's going on here and now? And like how can we like focus on that and center on that? There's things that we call grounding strategies. Some of them include like kind of diaphragmic breathing. And so the breathing, yes, and so the
that's
breathing.
That's what the panic attacks to help with.
Yes, and the main reason, going back to that physical, mental body connection, is when we're really anxious, our nervous system gets really activated, and it goes into fight or flight. Even if we haven't experienced a trauma or haven't experienced anything really traumatic, and when we're anxious, our nervous system is heightened and like kind of in that like kind of like protective, like aware mode. So even doing something as really intentional diaphragmatic breathing can help to balance and center our like nervous system and help to recenter us. And so that's something that I encourage for all my clients, especially when they struggle with panic attacks or just any anxiety, is trying to working on ways to ground themselves to the here and now and the present.
So you just literally just explained meditation.
Yeah, that's exactly.
You just explained meditation.
On that. Yeah.
For meditation, for me, when I tried it, I was wondering, my mind is supposed to be quiet, but Jay Shetty is one person who talks about it a lot. It's like, your mind doesn't have to be quiet.
Yes.
Your mind can be still going and working while you're in.
It's actually a beautiful thing. Though.
Yes.
Now you're like, okay, well, my mind's going here, my mind's going there. How can I recenter myself?
Yes.
And practicing that when you're in places where it's like, a lot
chaotic.
of times, chaotic. People are afraid of energy.
Yes. Yeah.
Like they're freaked out by energy. So you have to, they have a phrase where they say, you become a walking meditation.
Right.
And I am literally that. I am 2 years into fully meditating and I love it because it has changed my life so much.
Yeah.
Like, literally nothing bothers me or freaks me out because it's just like, I'm here. This is what's going on now. You know, maybe if I was like, knock on wood, locked up or something. But like, what the fuck?
And for a lot of people,
get out of here.
For a lot of people, they don't know that there's different types of meditation.
Yes.
So people would recite words during their meditation. There's people would have beads and they would have this feeling because you're supposed to be in the moment.
Yes.
The feeling, the smell, the taste, everything, you got to feel what's happening
now.
Funny enough, that's another grounding strategy that I do with folks is incorporating the 5 senses. And the goal of it really is to just focus on being present, going back to the mindfulness part. And so thinking about what 5 things you can see or hear, what can you taste, maybe smell, touch, right?
Right, so we don't have a lot of time. So
I know.
So before we go, this is one topic that I'm going to touch on. I'm going to say a few things on.
All right.
So I believe that your food has a lot to do with your hormonal imbalances, which causes depression and anxiety. Your food, what you eat, what you listen to, the people you have around you. All those things contribute to, even if you're pregnant and all these things, like these things affect your child, what you eat, what you drink, what you say, what you listen to. So what's your thoughts on how does your food, your diet affect your depression and anxiety?
So our kind of like what you're saying, there are certain like nutritional, values or properties to the food that we're eating. And so that just impacts our overall body and well-being. And so for certain people, this, for instance, when we talk about like substances or like drinking, that's not going to help you to it's just going to suppress your emotions. And so thinking about, okay, like if I'm being like physically active and moving my body, that can help to increase, the dopamines in your body, like get you moving and excited. The same thing with food. And so we encourage folks to like making sure that you're having as much as possible, like just like a balanced diet, balanced food. Because like all of those things, as you mentioned, this impacts our nutrition. There's also a lot of research that shows like our gut health is impacted by our emotions, like kind of can impact our emotions. That's anxiety. Actually, for some people, their anxiety presents as like stomach pains or kind of like gastro.
So can it be in the reverse? Can your mental health affect your physical health? Because I've heard that a lot.
So for the way in which I've seen it is like for some people they lose their appetite when they're depressed. So when they're really depressed, sometimes it can be really hard to eat. Like they might just have a hard time just introducing nutrients into their body. So again, it can definitely work in the reverse as well.
I wish this conversation would go on a lot longer.
I know. I loved your guys' questions. I was like, yes.
I have so much I could talk about on the topic, but I really want to thank you for coming. I really want you to come back.
I would love to come back for sure. We can do a part 2.
Definitely. So real quick, we're going to tap into Stretch's Corner, discuss what's going on in the world, guys. So yes, Stretch, what are we talking about tonight?
So tonight we're going to talk about there's a situation that happened back in Jamaica with a reggae artist, Sizzla. And what Sizzla did was he was burning the plaques of what DJ Khaled sent him for appreciation for being on his previous album, not this album that he just dropped, the one before that. I think his father, PsyD, he sent him a plaque saying, like, thank you for being on the album. I think he went platinum or something like that. And the narrative around it is that he didn't like the fact that his name wasn't big on the plaque, and Khaled's name was bigger on the plaque. And he literally burned it, broke it up, burnt the whole thing. And I personally didn't like that. I didn't like what he did. I want to know you guys' thoughts on it, but I want to say my thoughts first. So I feel like we have, our music is going on a downward spiral as far as our dancehall and reggae music. And I feel like what has a lot to do with that is the fact that the people that came before that went on this level didn't do business properly, didn't handle business properly. You know, so in order for, when that happened, it affected everybody that came behind them. You get what I'm saying? So those things like that, for people, if you're on this level and you magnify that so much and everybody can see you doing this thing that is not right, that is not professional, then it affects the rest of the culture. Now everybody sees that because that went to the shade room, that went to the breakfast club. You know,
especially this day and age of the social media. World.
Exactly. And I feel like if we don't, as Caribbean people, I'm speaking for Caribbean people, take responsibility, like this is not just about money, this is about a legacy. Because even in other cultures, like there's white bands doing reggae, right? The white bands would take smaller white band on the road with them to open for them. Now their audience sees this white band. In 2 years, this small band becomes the big band. And that's how they do it. They bring a small band, now they become a big band. Now it's a whole conglomerate of white bands everywhere. We don't do that. Because we're all about ourselves and our own ego. Ego was one thing I wanted to touch on, which I didn't get to. But we're not even. So I want to know you guys' thoughts on that.
You know, I think only thing I haven't struggled with is sometimes I do think it's unfair to generalize like the actions of one person to a whole community or whole race. And so, yes, what Sizzle did wasn't probably the healthiest way to handle a disagreement or, conflict. And I would say, I think it would be unfair for then like everybody to be like, see, like that's why Jamaicans, and we don't want to work with them. And because like, that's just one person. And so like, we can't say that he's reflective of like the whole like other Jamaican or, reggae artists. But could he have handled it better? Yes, absolutely. Ego, I think is, something that would have been a good conversation is just like, men and mental health, because I think sometimes it's really hard for men to communicate their feelings and emotions, and so like I wonder for him, like for Sizzla, if it's like if you're deeper, like if you're just like it can't just be like disrespected, but maybe just like triggers something for you, but you don't know how to communicate it or how to express it, and so hey, I'm gonna just burn it on fire, like. And
triggers are real, so that could be a thing. Channel trigger.
I really just try to not even talk about stuff like this because everyone has their own personal issues that they're dealing with inside of them, within. I think that he could have definitely went another route, even call him up, video call him and say, yo, look, my name is only this little part, what's going on. And then DJ Khaled is a person of understanding, from what I've seen.
From what we've seen.
Like, nothing but and good vibes, positivity.
Exactly, and he respects our culture, the Jamaican culture, so much. I think it probably hurt his heart to even see that, but sadly to say, our men, our Jamaican men, are just really stuck in their ways, and they don't open up their mind to possibilities of dealing with conflict in other ways. So we're terrible at that. Exactly. And it's connected even with every other thing that they have to deal with, family relationships. Sometimes they will just shut off and just do what they think, and they like they love to say them brain chick. So it happens, but for me, I just think that he could have dealt with it a different way. I know DJ Khaled feels really terrible that it happened and whatever, but I wish them the best.
I hope they can reconcile.
Yes,
you know,
and that they talk about it.
He is the godfather of his son.
Oh, yeah. Okay, see, he's the godfather of his son. And that's just a whole, and that's even more of a hurt.
Right.
And he did cut out Assad's picture. So let's give him
I don't think that makes a difference.
It makes a difference from a parent standpoint.
Yeah,
because now he's like, the kid is not involved. This is business.
He's like man to man.
Exactly.
Like,
this is not.
It's,
so I
unspoken.
get that.
It's like kind of an unspoken rule, but I still think disrespect is disrespect.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it goes to show how we don't know how to deal with conflict.
Yeah.
You know, I can't tell the last time, like, I've seen friends fall out.
Yeah.
And all they had to do was have a conversation.
All they had to do was have a conversation.
You know, so we're like I said, I wish we had more time to touch on all this stuff. But I really want to thank you for coming, Jodie.
Thank you.
One more thing before we end. We're going to end with our quick quote of the day. We have 2 seconds, and then we're just going to talk about what it says to us, and then we'll be out of here, guys. All right. So this is our quote. Worrying is carrying tomorrow's load with today's strength. Carrying 2 days at once, it is moving into tomorrow ahead of time. Worrying doesn't empty tomorrow of its sorrow. It empties today of its strength. By Carrie Ten Boom. I love that quote.
Yeah.
Because I think it's just so perfect for today's episode.
Yes.
And just talking about mental health and anxiety.
Yes.
Because like you said earlier, that anxiety is literally seeing what's going on in the future and allowing it to
impact your today,
your now. So I love that, because I think like everyone that does suffer from anxiety is something that they should definitely put in the back of their mind, like, okay, I would deal with that later, or I just want to be centered in here. Right. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, the last line, the worrying impacts the today, right?
Yes. The strength of
empty the strength of today really speaks to that, of how by worrying, we're so much like worrying about something that hasn't even happened yet, is impacting our mood or like our day to day. And so like, I think that is great of sometimes asking us like, is this even worth me worrying about now?
Sometimes as people, we don't know how to control that, not thinking about tomorrow, because us, like, I can speak for Black people, we go through so much that we want to know where the next meal is coming from. Sometimes we don't know that. We want to know what's going to happen for us tomorrow, like how we're going to pay our bills, like all these are worries of the future. It's hard not to think about that especially when you have kids or you have a family, you know. But I always tell people, like, you have life, you know, there's possibilities. You know what I'm saying? Like, even though it's hard not to think about, what's going to happen in the future, but you can think about that but not dwell on it. You know, don't let it be that burden on you, because as long as you're going to live to see that day, there's going to be a possibility if you're fixing whatever problem there is. So I understand the quote, but I also understand the other end of it. You know what I'm saying? Us as people, like I said, if we don't unlearn a lot of things and relearn a lot of things, we will always be in the same place. So, I still think if you don't have to live in the tomorrow, don't. Be present as much as possible.
Have faith, man.
As you can.
Have faith, know that it's going to be all right. I have a Kuna Matata tattoo.
I love that. I love it.
No worries, man. Just know everything's going to be fine.
Yes.
That's okay, Bob Marley.
I have one love on me, too. Okay, so thank you so much, Jodie.
Thank you.
You were amazing.
We appreciate you so much for coming.
Yes. So thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you guys next time on the Student to Life podcast.
Peace out, man.
Bye.